Trade caravans, supply wagons, and even normal travelers have been reporting attacks more frequently on the road, particularly east of town. Those who've worked protection and escort jobs have seen it firsthand. Rumor is that this is the work of a bandit lord known as the Hark. Recently, attacks have become so common that the local merchants plan to pay what they've taken to calling the Hark tax when traveling. A dark joke. Are the bandits really that adept at avoiding the patrols? Are the sentries incompetent? Does the Lord's Alliance not care for the plight of the common man? Or worse, are they in league with this Hark?
May 2nd, 2021. Episode 1. The Demands Made of Us. Weather forecast: clear day. When I woke up today, I had an inkling something peculiar might happen. I had a dream where a large water basin was hovering over my head. A creature who could only be described as a giant was holding it in its arms, but I couldn't make out its features. It was too tall. I awaited the feeling of cold water falling over me, but when I looked up, the water wasn't falling down. To my amazement, it was curving up into a U shape and splashing back onto itself. The memory of that dream was still in my head when I woke up. I thought it confusing, but I chose to move on with my day. I took to the library as usual while it was still early, and well before that peculiar thing I had mentioned happened. I think it had probably been sometime in the afternoon. It had been a fairly normal day up until my dear friend Moose found me reshelving some books. I'm used to Moose's animated way of speaking at times, so when she started throwing words at me I didn't catch what she was saying in the beginning. I was thinking she was likely just excited about something at her shop and running up to explain it to me at first sighting. Then I turned to address her and I noticed she wasn't alone. There was a halfling with her. Not just any halfling, a Kyokyojo of the Kyokyojo clan. I could recognize him by his black hair. His name was Varlo's Kyokyojo. And looking back at Moose I realized she didn't appear excited, she looked panicked. It turns out they were there to recruit me. Moose's parents had been taken by bandits, while away on artificer business for the Kyokyojo clan. There was a ransom note left behind. "We have your artificers. If you want to see the gnomes alive again, follow the instructions included. 500 gold pieces." The note went on to instruct someone to meet the assailants at the edge of the high forest, near Zelbros, in a clearing. We were to follow the blue hawk markers. Both Varlos and Moose intended on me accompanying her on this journey. I couldn't say no, especially not after getting a glimpse at my dear friend's desperate face, but I told them both I have no experience adventuring. None whatsoever. Sure, I've acquired the use of magic and a spell or two, but I've barely been outside the walls of Secomber. I'm just not confident. Not at all. Moose seemed to understand this and she too mentioned her lack of experience in adventuring, but she also was determined to not let that hold her back. I can't blame her if her parents are in trouble and I admire her courage. Thankfully Varlos spoke up and mentioned that the plan was to recruit others to go with us. Some with more experience to offer. I exhaled with some relief after hearing that, and from there the three of us set out to find others to join us on this sudden and unexpected journey. From the library we set out and made our way over to the Temple of Warkeen where Varlos had mentioned having a friend. When we arrived Varlos made his way over to a paladin woman and was speaking to her in a familiar manner. We would come to find out that this was Elise Sunwalker. And though she was experienced, she also seemed to be unable to go with us at the time. I think it was something regarding her armor as she wasn't wearing her chest piece. That was when Elise directed us to another paladin attending to the gardens, someone she may have been mentoring. This is where Moose and I came face to face with Kairax, or more like face to legs and waistline. I say this because Kairax is extremely tall. I think she is nearly 2 feet taller than myself. Not only that, but she is a half-orc. I've never befriended a half-orc before. Moose and I were a bit intimidated to say the least, but Kairax proved to be very friendly and boisterous upon meeting us. She also was very willing to aid us on our quest to save Moose's parents. Moose and I told her a little about ourselves, and in return, she showed us a bit of her own magic by speaking to a bird. Even with Kairax now on board, Varlos was not satisfied with our growing group. He insisted we were still in need of more people who had legitimate adventuring experience. I was definitely okay with that. We arrived at what presumably was the Adventurers Guild. I remember taking in the dark surroundings of the place for a moment, but it quickly became difficult to do that, as a shouting match was happening inside. There seemed to be a large human man with a big sword on his back, arguing with the tiefling behind the counter. Something about rat pelts, I think. It was honestly hard to follow, and I wasn't trying to. I wanted to stay out of it. The issue was we needed to speak to the tiefling. Varlos was doing his best to try and cut in between the two arguing. Finally, the large man with the sword seemed to huff and step away. Varlos was quick to jump in and ask the tiefling if he knew of any experienced adventurers who'd be willing to join us in saving Moose's parents. The man behind us began to spout some words about the tiefling cheating people. Moose then seemed to become razor-focused on that man. She approached him and asked about his experience adventuring. He went on to boast about how he was loaded with experience. He claimed to have traveled to Secomber from a village way up north, beyond the spine of the world. That's a really hard tale for me to believe. I've never heard of people living there in such a harsh environment. This man was Svend, and with the promise of being able to keep anything we found by Varlos and being able to fight, he agreed to help us find Moose's parents. With that we headed back out onto the streets. My next thought was on how best to prepare for this trip we would be making, but I wasn't able to think too much on it before we were approached. It was another human man. He looked to be just slightly shorter than Svend, and leaner. He introduced himself as the Great Sabatini, but mentioned we could call him Thane. Moose's eyes seemed to light up after hearing this. He explained to us that he couldn't help but notice our growing group and asked what we were planning. Moose immediately began to gush about meeting the Great Sabatini, as she seemed to be a fan or had heard of him somehow. She then went on to explain our plight. She mentioned how Svend had joined us as an experienced adventurer, because we really needed someone like that in this group. Thane seemed willing to offer us a hand after hearing about this and the agreement about loot. He explained to us that he too had experience under his belt. We weren't really in a position to refuse more help, so we agreed to let him join us. This ended up being our group. Now that we had recruited enough people, our next move was to discuss what we would need to set out. The plan was to leave in the morning. Varlos was to lend us each a horse except for Svend, who had his own. He gave us some starting funds, and he asked us to keep track of our expenses so he could reimburse us later. Svend and Thane suggested we buy adventuring packs for the trip, so with our starting money in hand we made our way to the shops. With the coin Varlos had given us and a little contribution from both Moose and myself, we were able to get everyone a pack for the journey ahead. After this, we all agreed we would meet up in the morning, but I made a stop at the library before heading home to turn in for the night, just to see if I could find out anything about the Delimbia road we would be traveling on. Turns out there is a lot of potential dangers: bears, boars, wolves, spiders, axebeaks, orcs, and of course bandits. Looks like we will have our work cut out for us. The next morning, we were met with rain. Not quite the day of adventure I had imagined. It was bad enough that we went and bought some cloaks before setting out with the horses. Speaking of horses, before that day, I had never been on one. I did better than Moose while mounting. She also lacked experience. We headed out while it was still early, following the Delimbia road, expecting a nearly 2-day trip on horseback. The beginning of the trip was rather calm despite my worries. During the daylight hours we made casual conversation in an effort to pass time and get to know one another better. Once night came, we had the realization that we would need to make camp, but due to the concern of frequent bandit attacks in the area, we decided to make 2 campsites. One would be Svend alone a little further up the path. This was meant to be a decoy camp in case someone chose to attack us. The second camp is where the rest of us would remain for the night. With the help of Svend and Thane we got our camps ready and then we all turned in for the night.